Hey guys, tonight we're stepping away from the grand tapestries of recorded history, from dusty archives and battle-scarred landscapes, and into a realm woven from moonlight, wildflowers, and the often bittersweet melodies of ancient Greek myth. Imagine yourself wandering through sun-dappled forest where every rustling leaf might be a nymph's whisper, every clear spring a reflection of a god's passing fancy. Tonight, we're gently retelling one of the most poignant and timeless of these tales, the story of Echo and Narcissus, a myth that explores the delicate, dangerous interplay of voice and image, of unrequited love and fatal self-absorption. Now, if you were suddenly cursed by an Olympian deity to only ever repeat the last words you heard, and then you fell hopelessly in love with someone whose primary relationship goal was to exclusively date their own reflection, you probably won't survive this particular romantic comedy. Because, spoiler alert, it's very much not a comedy. It's a gentle tragedy, perfect for drifting off to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And please do let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always a joy to imagine these ancient stories reaching out across the miles and the millennia. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the heart of ancient Greece, a land of rugged mountains, deep green forests, and sun-kissed valleys. A landscape that breathes with myth and magic. It is a time when the world feels young, when gods and goddesses still walk among mortals, often with mischievous or calamitous intent, and when nature itself is alive with spirits, the dryads in the trees, the naiads in the streams, and pertinent to our tale, the Oreads, the nymphs of the mountains and grottos. It's within this vibrant, often perilous tapestry of mythic reality that our two protagonists, Echo and Narcissus, begin their separate, fated existences. Let's first seek out Echo. She is one of these Oreads, a mountain nymph. Graceful and lovely as any of her kind, imagine her dwelling in the cool, shadowy recesses of Mount Cithaeron, or perhaps Mount Helicon, places sacred to the muses themselves. The air around her is alive with the scent of wild thyme, oregano, and damp earth, the distant sound of shepherds' pipes, and the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. But Echo possesses a particular trait that sets her apart from her often more reticent nymph sisters. She has a beautiful, melodious voice and an almost irrepressible, boundless love for conversation. She adores a good chat, a witty repartee, the playful give and take of words. She's not malicious or a gossip in a mean-spirited way. Rather, she's filled with an exuberant, almost childlike delight in the sheer act of communication. She is, in the parlance of our times, an extreme extrovert, the life and soul of any woodland gathering, probably capable of talking the hind legs off a centaur if given half a chance. You can almost hear her laughter like the bubbling of a hidden spring, echoing through the trees. Her words tumbling out in a cascade of charming, if somewhat relentless, enthusiasm. Her fellow nymphs might sometimes roll their ethereal eyes. Oh, there goes Echo again. Bless her loquacious heart. She could charm the bees from the hive with her chatter, if only she'd pause long enough for them to get a word in edgewise. Now, let us turn our gaze to another part of this mythic landscape, perhaps to the region of Thespiae and Boeotia. Here, a youth of almost unearthly beauty is coming into his own. This is Narcissus. His parentage is suitably divine or semi-divine. His father is most often named as Cephisus, a local river god, his waters winding through the fertile plains. His mother is Liriope, a nymph, perhaps a naiad associated with her husband's river, or another Oread. From the moment of his birth, Narcissus's physical perfection is said to have been astonishing, a beauty so radiant it seemed less mortal and more akin to that of a young Apollo. As he grows, this beauty only intensifies. Raven or golden locks the myths vary, eyes like deep, still pools reflecting a summer sky. a form so perfectly proportioned that sculptors would weep with a mixture of admiration and despair, knowing their Parian marble could never truly capture such living grace. He is, by all accounts, breathtakingly, heart-stoppingly beautiful. This extraordinary beauty. However, it comes with a shadow, a prophecy whispered at his birth. His mother, Liriope, anxious about her son's future, especially given his almost dangerous allure, sought out the counsel of the blind but all-seeing prophet, Tiresias. Tiresias, a figure who had famously lived as both a man and a woman, and possessed deep, often unwelcome, insights into the workings of fate and the minds of gods and mortals, gave her a typically enigmatic and unsettling answer. When Liriope asked if her son would live a long and happy life, Tiresias replied that Narcissus would indeed reach a ripe old age. If he never came to know himself, si se non noverit, a key mythological detail. This pronouncement, like so many oracular utterances, is a riddle whose true tragic meaning will only become apparent when it is far too late to avert the destiny it foretells. It hangs over Narcissus's youth, a quiet, almost forgotten, condition for his continued existence. Know thyself was a famous Delphic maxim, a cornerstone of Greek wisdom. For Narcissus, however, self-knowledge will prove not a path to enlightenment, but a gateway to doom. It's the ultimate cosmic catch-22. So, in these early days, before their paths cross with such devastating consequences, you have these two distinct figures. Echo, the nymph whose essence is her voice, her connection to others through speech, her vibrant sociability, and Narcissus, the youth whose essence is his almost unearthly beauty, a beauty that already, perhaps, is beginning to create a subtle distance between himself and the world, as he becomes the object of constant, often overwhelming, admiration and desire. He spends his days hunting in the forests, a solitary and graceful figure and skilled with the bow and javelin, but seemingly indifferent to the longing glances and whispered praises that follow him like a second shadow. A quirky, or perhaps illustrative, tidbit about nymphs like Echo is their complex relationship with the Olympian gods. They were often seen as attendants to greater deities, like Artemis or Hera. But also, as we shall see in Echo's case, they could become entangled in divine dramas, sometimes as pawns, sometimes as unfortunate collateral damage. Their lives, while seemingly idyllic and connected to the timeless beauty of nature, were not immune to the caprices and passions of the more powerful Olympians. Classicists and scholars of mythology continue to explore the rich symbolism inherent in these figures, even before their main narrative begins. Is Echo's talkativeness a sign of her vibrant life force, or does it already hint at a lack of true listening, a prelude to her later fate of only being able to reflect? Is Narcissus's beauty a divine gift, or is it, even from the start, a kind of isolating curse, setting him apart and fostering an inward focus? The stories are silent on these premonitions, allowing us only to see them in their initial, unsuspecting states. Two beings of mythic potential, moving unknowingly towards a shared, sorrowful destiny, their individual allure and voice about to be tragically and irrevocably intertwined. You are still in that luminous, mythical landscape of ancient Greece, where the air is alive with the whispers of nature spirits and the often capricious interventions of the Olympian gods. We've met Echo, the mountain nymph whose beautiful voice and irrepressible love of conversation define her very essence, and Narcissus, the youth of such breathtaking beauty that he seems almost a divine being himself, yet remains aloof and untouched by the adoration he inspires. Before their paths cross in that fated, tragic encounter by the forest pool, Echo's life is about to take a devastating turn. A cruel twist orchestrated by none other than Hera, the powerful, regal, and notoriously jealous queen of the gods. It is an encounter that will silence Echo's own voice, reducing her to a mere shadow of her former self. and setting the stage for the heartbreaking misunderstandings to come. To understand why Hera, the majestic consort of Zeus, would concern herself with a seemingly harmless mountain nymph like Echo, you need to recall, as we touched upon briefly, the rather adventurous romantic life of Zeus himself. The king of the gods, for all his power and supposed wisdom, had a notoriously wandering eye and an insatiable appetite for affairs with goddesses, nymphs, and mortal women alike. He was the original Olympian Lothario, his conquest legendary, his methods of seduction often involving elaborate and sometimes frankly bizarre transformations: a bull for Europa, a swan for Leda, a shower of gold for Danae. He was, you might say, a god who really enjoyed his divine visitations. And Hera, his long-suffering wife, the goddess of marriage and childbirth, was quite understandably perennially enraged by his infidelities. Her days were often spent in a state of simmering resentment and vigilant suspicion, always on the lookout for Zeus's latest transgression, always ready to unleash her formidable wrath upon any unfortunate nymph or mortal who caught her husband's eye, or worse, actively participated in deceiving her. It made for a rather dynamic and often explosive marital situation on Mount Olympus. Honestly, Zeus, you can imagine Hera sighing, polishing her scepter with a bit more force than necessary. Another important meeting with a minor river spirit that just happens to coincide with you smelling faintly of lotus blossoms and cheap mortal perfume. Do you take me for a fool? Now, our lovely, loquacious Echo, in her innocent enjoyment of social interaction, and perhaps a touch of naive vanity at being noticed by the king of the gods, found herself unwittingly caught in the crossfire of this divine marital strife. According to Ovid's Metamorphoses, which provides one of the most famous and detailed tellings of this myth, Zeus would often dally with the nymphs in the mountains and forest where Echo roamed. And whenever he sensed that Hera was approaching, perhaps on one of her surprise spot checks, he would cunningly employ Echo's particular talent. He would encourage the talkative nymph to engage Hera in conversation, to distract her with a flood of stories, questions, and charming, if ultimately pointless, chatter. Echo, perhaps flattered by the attention from the mighty Zeus, or simply unable to resist the opportunity for a good, long chinwag with anyone, even a suspicious and increasingly irritated queen of the gods would happily oblige. She became, in essence, Zeus's unwitting, or perhaps over time, witting verbal smokescreen, his conversational decoy. A key mythological detail here is that Echo wasn't necessarily malicious in this. She was just being herself, a creature who loved to talk, and who perhaps didn't fully grasp the Olympian-level fury she was risking. So, picture the scene. Hera, her divine nostrils practically flaring with suspicion, descends upon a secluded grove where she suspects Zeus is up to no good. But before she can catch him in flagrante delicto with, say, a particularly fetching dryad, out pops Echo, all smiles and effusive greetings. "Oh, Queen Hera, what a delightful surprise to see you in our humble woods today. Did you know? The wild crocuses are simply divine this year. And have I told you about the fascinating argument the satyrs were having yesterday about the relative merits of reed pipes versus panpipes? It went on for hours, and then Pan himself showed up. And you'll never guess what he has said." And so on, and so on. Echo's voice weaving a captivating, if ultimately time-wasting, tapestry of words, while Zeus and his companion of the moment made their hasty, and no doubt very grateful, escape. For a time, this strategy worked. Hera, though perhaps a little exasperated by Echo's relentless chatter, might be sufficiently distracted or delayed. But the Queen of the Gods was no fool, and she was possessed of a notoriously short fuse when it came to her husband's infidelities. Eventually, she realized she was being deliberately stalled, that Echo's charming volubility was a recurring, convenient shield for Zeus's transgressions. The moment of Hera's epiphany must have been terrifying for any lesser being in the vicinity. Her patience snapped. Her divine eyes, usually so regal, would have blazed with cold fury. A quirky, though quite understandable, reaction from Hera might have been, right, that's the last time I get stuck listening to a 3-hour monologue about the proper way to press wildflowers when my husband is clearly off seducing another naiad. This nymph needs to learn a lesson about the appropriate use of her vocal cords. And so, with the full weight of her Olympian authority, Hera pronounced her devastating curse upon Echo. "Because your tongue has tricked me," the goddess declared, or words to that effect. "You shall henceforth have little use of that tongue. Your power of speech shall be curtailed. You shall never again be able to speak first, but you shall always have the last word, though it will not be your own." And with that, Echo's fate was sealed. Her greatest gift, her beautiful, expressive voice, was cruelly twisted. She could no longer initiate conversation, no longer share her own thoughts or stories, no longer even ask a simple question. She was condemned to be a mere reflection, a vocal shadow, able only to repeat the last few syllables of whatever was spoken to her. The immediate impact of this curse on Echo's daily life would have been catastrophic. Imagine the bubbly, sociable nymph suddenly finding herself unable to greet her friends, to join in their laughter, to share her observations. Her attempts at communication would become frustratingly fragmented, a series of broken echoes that made true connection impossible. She who had lived through her voice was now effectively silenced, her identity profoundly and tragically altered. Classicists still argue about the nuances of Echo's culpability in this divine drama. Was she an innocent victim of Zeus's manipulations and Hera's disproportionate rage? Or did she bear some responsibility for knowingly aiding Zeus in his deceptions? Ovid's portrayal leans towards a degree of naive complicity on Echo's part, but the punishment still seems extraordinarily harsh. The curse is not just a silencing, it's a perversion of her very nature, turning her love of speech into a source of constant frustration and isolation, a somber prelude to the unrequited love that will soon consume her entirely. Hera's curse has fallen upon Echo with the chilling finality of Olympian judgment. The once loquacious mountain nymph, whose voice danced through the forest like a sunbeam, is now tragically constrained, her ability to initiate speech stolen, her tongue bound to the frustrating task of mere repetition. You can only imagine the profound desolation that settles upon her in the wake of this divine retribution. Her vibrant, chattering world shrinks. Her social connections fray, and she begins a sorrowful retreat into the deepest, most secluded corners of her woodland domain. It is in this state of enforced silence and growing loneliness that she will first encounter the beautiful, indifferent Narcissus, a meeting that will ignite a hopeless love and deepen her already poignant tragedy. In the days and weeks following Hera's decree, Echo's daily life transforms from one of joyful, if perhaps sometimes overwhelming, sociability to one of increasing isolation. How could it be otherwise? Her very essence and her way of being in the world was so intimately tied to her voice, her ability to converse, to share, to connect through words. Now, when she tries to speak, to greet a fellow nymph or a passing shepherd, only the tail end of their own utterances comes back from her lips. Imagine the confusion, the frustration, the slow, dawning horror as she realizes the full extent of her new limitation. She might see a group of her nymph sisters laughing and chatting by a stream, a scene she would have once eagerly joined. Now, she can only linger on the periphery, a silent, sorrowful observer, an outsider in her own world. If they call to her, "Echo, come join us," her only possible reply is a heartbreaking, "Join us," an invitation she can no longer truly accept in the way she once did. It's like being trapped behind a one-way mirror where you can see and hear everyone, but your own attempts to communicate are distorted into a meaningless mimicry. She's probably thinking, well, this is just great. I used to be the life of the party, and now I'm just the party's annoying repeat function. Hera really knows how to hold a grudge. So, she withdraws. She seeks out the quietest, most unfrequented parts of the mountains and forests, places where she is less likely to encounter others, less likely to be subjected to the painful reminder of her cursed speech. The wild, untamed landscapes that once resonated with her joyful voice now become her sanctuary of sorrow. She might spend her days wandering through shadowy groves, sitting by lonely pools, or hidden in dark caves. Her only company the rustling leaves, the sighing wind, and the constant internal ache of her lost voice and her growing loneliness. A key mythological detail here is this retreat into solitude. It's not just a physical withdrawal, it's an emotional one. A turning inward as the world of external communication becomes increasingly painful and frustrating for her. Her once vibrant spirit begins to dim. The joy she found in sharing stories, in witty banter, in the simple act of connecting through language, is now replaced by a quiet, pervasive melancholy. She is still a nymph, still part of the natural world, but she is a muted version of her former self, a beautiful instrument whose primary string has been cruelly snapped. It is during this period of sorrowful isolation, as she roams the silent woodlands, that she first catches sight of Narcissus. Imagine her, perhaps concealed behind a thicket of ferns or nestled in the mossy hollow of an ancient tree. When this vision of almost unearthly beauty passes by, Narcissus, as we know, is a solitary hunter, graceful and aloof, his attention seemingly fixed only on the pursuit of game, or perhaps even then, on the contemplation of his own perfect self. For Echo, in her profound loneliness and her yearning for connection, the sight of him is like a sudden, dazzling burst of sunlight in her shadowy world. His physical perfection is undeniable, almost divine, and in her isolated state, like with her own sense of self so diminished, she becomes instantly, overwhelmingly, and hopelessly captivated. It's the kind of desperate, idealized infatuation that can only take root in a heart starved of genuine affection and meaningful interaction. By all the gods and little fishes, she might think, her own silent heart aching. Who is that impossibly beautiful creature he makes Apollo look like a slightly rumpled shepherd? If only I could tell him how... Well, I can't tell him anything. Can I? From that moment on, Narcissus becomes the unwitting object of her silent, secret adoration. She begins to follow him, discreetly, from a distance, through the forests and across the mountains. She watches him as he hunts, as he rests by clear springs, as he moves with that proud, unconscious grace that so enthralls her. A quirky and rather poignant aspect of this is that she is a stalker in the most literal, yet entirely innocent and unthreatening sense. Her pursuit is born not of malice or a desire to possess, but of a deep, desperate longing just to be near him, to bask, however unseen, in the glow of his beauty, to feel some semblance of connection. Even if it is only the connection of a hidden observer, she becomes his shadow, his unseen admirer. Her days now given a new, if ultimately painful, purpose to watch and to yearn. Classicists often discuss Echo's transformation in this period as a gradual fading, a loss of substance directly linked to her loss of voice and her unrequited passion. Her physical being, no longer nourished by joyful interaction or the ability to express her inner self, begins to mirror the insubstantiality of her cursed speech. Historians still debate the exact origins of the Echo myth and whether her association with unrequited love was always central, or if different narrative strands were woven together over time. But for Echo, as she silently trails the beautiful, oblivious hunter, her woodland longing is a bittersweet torment. He represents everything she has lost: beauty, wholeness, the effortless ability to command attention even if he scorns it. Her love for him is a silent, secret fire, consuming her from within, a love that she knows, even before their fateful first encounter, she will likely never be able to truly express. Her world has become a stage for one, and she is the audience, hidden in the wings. her heart filled with a love that can only ever be an echo of a hope. You have seen Echo, her voice cruelly curtailed, now silently, ardently, following the beautiful youth Narcissus through the ancient Greek woodlands. Her heart is consumed by a love she cannot properly articulate, a longing born of her profound loneliness and his almost unearthly allure. But to truly grasp the tragic trajectory of their intertwined fates, you must now turn your gaze fully upon Narcissus himself, to understand the nature of this youth whose physical perfection is so absolute, yet whose heart remains a fortress of ice, impenetrable to the warmth of any affection offered to him. His beauty is a divine gift, or perhaps a subtle curse, that has shaped him into a creature of profound self-absorption and cold, disdainful pride. Narcissus, as we recall, is the son of the river god Cephissus and the nymph Liriope, a heritage that perhaps destined him for both extraordinary beauty and a certain watery, reflective quality. From his earliest days, he would have been an object of universal admiration. Other children would have stopped their games to stare. Adults would have marveled at his perfect features, his graceful movements. As he blossomed into young manhood, this adoration would only have intensified. Nymphs of the woods and waters would sigh his name. Mortal maidens from nearby villages would leave offerings at local shrines, praying for just a glance from his captivating eyes. Even, as some versions of the myth suggest, young men would find themselves drawn to his almost androgynous, otherworldly beauty. He walked through the world as a living masterpiece, a walking, talking, though not often, and rarely with warmth work of art. You can imagine the scene whenever he passed by a sudden hush, followed by a chorus of whispered superlatives and, inevitably, a few broken hearts left trailing in his wake. It's like being the undisputed teen idol of ancient Boeotia, but without the inconvenience of having to sign autographs or engage with your fan base. Oh, there goes Narcissus. A shepherd might say to his flock. Don't even bother trying to catch his eye, lads. He's more interested in admiring the way the sunlight glints off his own perfectly sculpted cheekbones. Still, can't deny he's easy on the eyes even for us rugged pastoral types. However, this constant, uncritical adulation seems to have had a profoundly isolating and ultimately detrimental effect on Narcissus's character. Instead of fostering kindness, empathy, or a desire for connection, it bred in him a deep-seated arrogance, a cold disdain for all those who offered him their affection. A key mythological attribute consistently ascribed to Narcissus is his absolute rejection of every suitor, male or female, mortal or nymph. He considered no one worthy of his love, no one equal to his own perceived perfection. He moved through the world in a bubble of self-sufficiency, his heart seemingly made of stone, or perhaps more fittingly, of flawless, cold marble. He wasn't just playing hard to get, he was genuinely, profoundly uninterested in anyone but himself, even before he fully knew himself in that fateful, prophetic sense. Ovid, in his Metamorphoses, provides numerous examples of Narcissus's cruel dismissals. He tells of many youths and many maidens who desired him, but so hard a pride Isios Nunira in that delicate form that no youth, no maiden ever touched his heart. His rejections were not gentle or kind. They were often scornful, contemptuous, adding insult to the injury of unrequited love. He seemed to take a perverse pleasure in the pain he caused, or at least to be utterly indifferent to it. He was beautiful, yes, but his beauty was a weapon, one he wielded without compassion. This coldness extended beyond just romantic overtures. He seems to have had no close friends, no real companions, apart from perhaps his hunting dogs. He preferred the solitude of the chase, the silent company of the forests and mountains, where he could presumably admire his own prowess without the annoying distraction of other people's feelings or expectations. His daily life was one of self-imposed isolation, not born of shyness, but of a profound, almost pathological, self-regard. A quirky, though telling, aspect of his character is his apparent lack of any discernible ambition beyond the immediate gratification of his own desires, which, before the pool seemed to have been limited to hunting and solitude. He shows no interest in power, in wealth beyond what his beauty might attract, or in contributing to society in any way. His existence is entirely self-contained, self-referential. He is a beautiful, empty vessel, reflecting only his own perfection. Classicists and psychoanalysts, as we've noted, have found Narcissus to be an endlessly fascinating figure, the very archetype of the narcissistic personality. His inability to empathize, his grandiose sense of self-importance, his exploitation of others' affections, his lack of genuine emotional connection. These are all hallmarks of the clinical condition that now bears his name. Historians still argue whether the ancient tellers of the myth consciously intended such a detailed psychological portrait, or if they were primarily crafting an etiological tale to explain the origin of the narcissus flower and the phenomenon of echoes, with a more general moral about the dangers of excessive pride and the punishment of cruelty in love. It's likely that the myth, like all great stories, accrued layers of meaning over time, its enduring power lying in its ability to resonate with these fundamental aspects of human psychology. For Echo, silently watching this beautiful, cold youth, his true nature would initially be obscured by the dazzling perfection of his outward form. She, like so many others, would be captivated by the surface, unable to perceive the emotional desert that lay within. Her love, born in her own loneliness and focused on his external beauty, is tragically mismatched with a being who is incapable of returning any affection, because his heart is already entirely and exclusively occupied by himself. The stage is set not just for Echo's heartbreak, but for Narcissus's own unique and poetically just downfall. His cold heart, which has frozen so many others, is about to be consumed by a fire of its own making. A fire ignited by the only beauty he deems worthy of his adoration. You are now deep within the sun-dappled, myth-infused forests of ancient Greece, a silent observer of two destinies about to collide with poignant and ultimately tragic consequences. Echo, her voice cruelly constrained by Hera's curse to mere repetition, nurses her secret, all-consuming love for the breathtakingly beautiful hunter. Narcissus. She follows him like a shadow, her heart aching with an affection she cannot truly articulate. Narcissus, in his turn, remains encased in his customary armor of proud indifference, oblivious to the devoted nymph who trails his every move, and equally unconcerned by the legion of admirers he has already scorned. The forest holds its breath. The moment is ripe for their fateful and exquisitely frustrating first proper interaction, a conversation doomed from the start, a plea for connection that can only ever be a series of misheard echoes and cruel misunderstandings. One day, as Ovid so memorably recounts, Narcissus is out hunting, his youthful energy carrying him deep into a secluded part of the woods. He becomes separated from his hunting companions, if indeed he had deigned to have any that day, and finds himself alone, perhaps a little disoriented, or simply wishing to know if anyone else is near. He calls out his clear, musical voice, a voice almost as beautiful as his face, ringing through the silent trees. Is anyone here equus adest in Ovid's Latin? An echo, who has been secretly, ardently, following him. Here's his call. Her heart, you can imagine, leaps with a mixture of terror and exhilarating hope. This is it. A chance. However slim, however fraught with the limitations of her cursed speech, to finally interact with her beloved. She is hidden nearby, perhaps behind a thicket of laurels or in the shadowy recess of a mossy outcrop, gathering all her courage, and bound by Hera's decree. She replies with the only word she can, the last word he spoke, imbued with all her own longing. Here, as she calls back, her voice a perfect, if perhaps slightly more ethereal and fainter, mimicry of his own. Narcissus, surprised and intrigued to hear a response in this seemingly deserted spot, looks around but sees no one. He calls out again. a little louder this time. Come, Vani. And Echo, her heart pounding, her hopes soaring, eagerly repeats his invitation, making it her own desperate plea. Come, Veni. Still seeing no one, a flicker of annoyance or perhaps just youthful impatience might cross Narcissus's perfect features. He calls out again. Why do you avoid me, or why do you flee from me? Quid me fugus? Echo pained by the implication that she is the one being elusive, when, in fact, she yearns only to be near him, can only tragically echo his question back. Avoid me, or flee from me, me fugas. This frustrating, almost comically tragic. Exchange continues each time Narcissus speaks, trying to locate the unseen speaker. Echo can only repeat his final words. Her attempts to communicate her affection, her presence, her very self, constantly thwarted by the curse. He hears only his own words thrown back at him, perhaps perceiving it as mockery, or the game of some playful but irritating woodland spirit. He has no way of knowing the depth of emotion, the desperate longing that lies behind those repeated syllables. It's like trying to have a heart-to-heart conversation with a chatbot that's stuck on a very limited, very literal, and increasingly frustrating script. For the love of Pan's pipes, who is out there playing these silly word games? Narcissus might grumble. If this is some local nymph's idea of a clever pickup line, it's failing rather spectacularly. A key mythological detail, and the turning point of this encounter, comes when Narcissus, perhaps exasperated but still curious, calls out something along the lines of, "Let us meet here," or "Let us come together here." Huck koyamas, Echo, seizing upon what she interprets as a genuine invitation, a sign that he might finally be willing to see her, to connect with her, repeats his words with all the fervent joy and hope in her heart. Let us meet here, or us come together here. Ekoemus. And with that, believing she has finally been summoned, she steps out from her hiding place, her arms outstretched in a gesture of eager, loving welcome, her eyes fixed adoringly on Narcissus. This is the moment of her greatest vulnerability, her most profound hope. She has revealed herself. She cannot speak her love in her own words, but surely he will see it in her eyes, in her trembling, open gesture. Surely the sight of a beautiful nymph, her face alight with adoration, will touch some chord of tenderness in his famously cold heart. But alas, Narcissus is Narcissus. He is not charmed, he is appalled. He, who has scorned the advances of countless others, who values his solitude and his own perfection above all else, sees only another unwelcome admirer, another creature daring to presume an intimacy with him. His beautiful face, which Echo had so adored from afar, now twists into an expression of disdain and revulsion. He recoils from her, stepping back as if from something unclean. A quirky, though devastatingly cruel, line Ovid gives him is, "I would die before I'd give you power over me," or more literally, "May I die before you have enjoyment of me. Ante amoriar quam sit tibi copia nostri?" He speaks with a cold, cutting finality. And poor Echo, her hopes shattered, her love thrown back in her face with such contempt, can only do one thing, the only thing her curse allows. With a voice choked with unspeakable sorrow, she repeats his final devastating words, words that seal her own heartbreak. Give you power over me, or yen before you have enjoyment of me, or simply a tragic, whispered enjoyment of me. It is the ultimate rejection, made infinitely more cruel because she is forced to pronounce her own doom, to articulate her own worthlessness in his eyes, using his very words, humiliated beyond measure, her spirit utterly broken. Echo turns and flees, disappearing back into the deepest shadows of the forest, her heart a wasteland of grief. Narcissus, ran with a dismissive shrug or perhaps a sigh of annoyance at having been bothered, continues on his solitary way, the encounter likely forgotten by him almost as soon as it is over. But for Echo, it is the end of all hope. Classicists still argue about the exact phrasing and interpretation of this crucial exchange in various ancient sources and translations, but the underlying emotional devastation for Echo remains constant. Her misheard plea, her bravely revealed love, has met only with a cold, beautiful, and utterly impenetrable wall of self-absorption. The first act of their shared tragedy is complete. Narcissus has delivered his cruel, dismissive parting shot. "May I die before you enjoy my body." And poor Echo, forced by her curse to repeat those devastating final words, has fled in shame and utter desolation back into the deepest shadows of the forest. You are now witness to the heartbreaking aftermath of this encounter, a period of profound, consuming grief for the gentle nymph, a sorrow so complete that it begins to physically erode her very being. This is not just a case of getting over a bad breakup. This is a mythological wasting away, a literal fading fueled by unrequited love and the agony of a voice that can no longer truly speak its pain. Imagine Echo in these days and nights of sorrowful retreat. She hides herself away in lonely caves, by forgotten springs, in the most desolate and unfrequented parts of the mountains she once roamed with such vibrant, talkative joy. She shuns all company, even that of her sister nymphs. The shame of Narcissus's rejection burns deep, made all the more bitter by her inability to articulate her feelings, to explain the misunderstanding, to even properly lament her loss in her own words. She is trapped in a prison of silence, punctuated only by the frustrating, fragmented echoes of the world around her. A world that now seems cold and indifferent to her suffering. It's like she's become a ghost in her own life, her presence increasingly insubstantial, her once bright spirit dimming with each passing day. She's probably not even trying to engage the local wildlife in conversation anymore. The squirrels were likely getting tired of hearing their own nut-burying plans repeated back to them anyway. This unrequited love diet? She might think, if her thoughts could still form coherent, original sentences. Is surprisingly effective for weight loss, though the side effects include existential despair and a tendency to blend into the moss. Not recommended. Ovid, in his Metamorphoses, describes her decline with poignant detail. He tells us that her love remained and grew on grief. Her anxious cares robbed her of sleep. Her body became gaunt and thin. All moisture left her flesh, and into air all her life's spirits fled. It is a slow, painful wasting away, a physical manifestation of her emotional desolation. Her beauty, which was once that of a vibrant mountain nymph, begins to fade. Her skin becomes pale and translucent. Her limbs grow frail, and her once sparkling eyes are now clouded with an unending sorrow. She is literally consumed by her unrequited passion for Narcissus, her life force seeping away like water into dry earth. A key mythological detail in this process is the idea that as her physical form diminishes, only her voice and, according to some tellings, her bones are left. Her bones, as we've touched upon, are said to turn to stone, which is why echoes are often heard in rocky, mountainous places. It's the lingering petrified essence of the nymph, still reflecting sound. And her voice, that once beautiful, loquacious instrument, now entirely detached from any physical form, becomes the disembodied phenomenon we know as an echo. She is no longer a nymph who echoes. She is echo itself, a sound without a source, a presence without a body, forever condemned to repeat the last fragments of other people's utterances. This metamorphosis is both profoundly tragic and deeply symbolic. The nymph whose identity was so tied to her ability to speak, and who lost that ability in its truest sense, now becomes nothing but a reflected sound, a perpetual auditory shadow. This fading is a powerful metaphor for the devastating impact of unrequited love and the inability to express one's true self. Echo, scorned by the one she adores, and unable to articulate her pain or her love in her own authentic voice. Literally disappears, her individuality dissolving into a mere acoustic phenomenon. It speaks to the way in which profound emotional suffering, if unaddressed and unshared, can feel like it's consuming us from within, diminishing our very sense of being. A quirky, though deeply melancholic, aspect to consider is how Echo, even in her fading state, might still be drawn to places where Narcissus might pass. Does she, as a disembodied voice, still try to linger near him, even though he is unaware of her presence or her suffering? The myths are often silent on these specific details, but the image of her sorrowful voice still trying to reach out, to connect, even as her physical self vanishes, is incredibly poignant. Classicists and literary scholars have long been fascinated by Echo's metamorphosis. Is it purely a punishment that began with Hera's curse and is now completed by Narcissus's rejection? Or does it also symbolize a certain passivity, a lack of agency that was perhaps inherent in her character even before the curse, a tendency to reflect rather than initiate, which becomes tragically literalized? Historians still argue whether the original folk versions of the Echo myth, which may have existed independently as a nature myth, explaining the phenomenon of echoes, were later combined with the Narcissus story to create this more complex and emotionally resonant narrative, or if they were always intertwined. But for Echo, as her body wastes away, her love unfulfilled, her voice now just a fleeting repetition of other sounds, it is the ultimate heartbreaking retreat. She has loved with all her being, a love that was perhaps born of her own loneliness and focused on an idealized image of beauty. And that love, met with cruel indifference and filtered through her own cursed inability to communicate, has led to her almost complete erasure as an individual. She becomes a haunting presence in the landscape, a sorrowful voice on the wind, a perpetual reminder of a love that was never truly heard, and a life that faded into a mere echo of what it once was. Her heartbreak is now etched into the very stones and silences of the wild places she once roamed. Echo has faded into a disembodied voice, her physical form consumed by the unendurable sorrow of Narcissus's cruel rejection. She now haunts the lonely places, a poignant, repeating whisper of unrequited love, her own story a tragic prelude to the fate that awaits the beautiful, heartless youth who spurned her. Narcissus, for his part, continues his solitary, self-absorbed wanderings, seemingly untouched by the devastation he leaves in his wake. Not just for Echo, but for a string of other nymphs and mortals whose affections he has contemptuously dismissed. But in the grand, often morally balanced, cosmos of Greek mythology, such callous pride and consistent cruelty rarely go unpunished. The scales of justice, though they may grind slowly, tend to grind exceedingly fine. And so, as Narcissus continues on his path of proud disdain, a prayer, a curse, a desperate plea for divine retribution from one of his many scorned and heartbroken admirers, finally ascends to the shadowy, implacable ears of a deity who specializes in exactly this kind of karmic rebalancing nemesis, the goddess of righteous indignation and divine vengeance. The specific identity of the individual whose plea finally triggers Nemesis's intervention is sometimes left anonymous in the myths, perhaps to symbolize the collective pain and anger of all those Narcissus has wronged. Ovid, in his Metamorphoses, simply states it was one of those he had rejected, aliquis despectus ab illo, someone slighted by him. Imagine this spurned lover, perhaps a gentle nymph whose heart Narcissus had trampled, or a hopeful youth whose advances he had met with icy scorn. Their love rejected, their pride wounded, their spirit crushed by his utter indifference. They can find no recourse among mortals. So, in their anguish and despair, they turn to the divine, specifically to Nemesis, the goddess who ensures that arrogance, hubris, does not go unpunished, and that in appropriate retribution, Nemesis is visited upon the transgressor. Their prayer would be a heartfelt cry for justice, a plea that Narcissus himself might one day experience the same torment of unrequited love that he so carelessly inflicts upon others. Oh, great Nemesis, unflinching daughter of night, they might have prayed, tears of anger and sorrow perhaps streaming down their face. Look upon the arrogance of this beautiful, heartless youth. He scorns all love. He delights in our pain. Let him too become a victim of an impossible passion. Let him love and love in vain. And may he desire what he can never attain, so that he may finally understand the suffering he has caused. It's a powerful, focused curse, not just for simple revenge, but for a specific, poetic justice, that he should feel what he made others feel. It's not wishing him a stubbed toe, it's wishing him a profoundly ironic, tailor-made emotional comeuppance. May he find someone as beautiful and as unobtainable as he believes himself to be. Nemesis, in her shadowy realm, hears this prayer. A key mythological detail about Nemesis is that she is not a goddess of arbitrary punishment or malicious wrath. She is an agent of cosmic balance, a divine enforcer of natural law and moral order. She represents the idea that there are limits to human fortune and human pride, and that when these limits are transgressed, a corrective force will inevitably be set in motion. She is often depicted with symbols of measurement and retribution, a bridle to restrain excess, a scourge to punish, a wheel to symbolize the turning of fortune, or a set of scales. She is stern, implacable, and patient, but her judgment, when it comes, is usually perfectly fitting to the crime. And Narcissus, with his extraordinary beauty, his equally extraordinary vanity, and his consistent cruelty to those who love him, has been ringing up a rather significant karmic debt on her divine abacus. Nemesis might muse, consulting her list of overdue accounts for divine retribution. Narcissus, son of Cephissus. Yes, quite the catalogue of inflicted heartaches here. The prayer from the spurned and tearful party seems entirely justified. Let's see. What would be a suitably ironic and educational torment for one so self-absorbed and so Nemesis, in her divine wisdom, or perhaps her divine sense of grim humor, assents to the prayer? She doesn't need to unleash a storm, send a monster, or strike Narcissus down with a plague. Her retribution will be far more subtle, far more personal, and far more psychologically devastating, perfectly tailored to his particular flaw. She will simply arrange for Narcissus, in his wanderings, to encounter an object of desire so perfect, so captivating, and so utterly unattainable that he will be consumed by it, just as others have been consumed by their hopeless love for him. The instrument of his downfall will not be an external enemy, but his own reflection, a quirky, though thought-provoking tidbit is that the concept of nemesis was deeply ingrained in Greek thought, often tied to the idea that the gods were envious of excessive human happiness or pride. Thanos Theon. While Nemesis herself isn't simply envy, she embodies the inevitable divine response to mortals who forget their place, who become too arrogant, or who inflict undue suffering on others without consequence. Narcissus has ticked all these boxes with considerable enthusiasm. Classicists and philosophers continue to explore the role of Nemesis and the concept of divine justice in Greek mythology. Is it a fatalistic worldview, where humans are merely puppets of divine will, or does it emphasize human responsibility, where our own actions and character flaws inevitably lead to predictable consequences, with the gods merely ensuring that the natural moral order is upheld? Historians still argue whether the depiction of Nemesis in specific myths reflects a consistent theological doctrine or varies according to the storyteller's particular moral or artistic aims. For now, however, the divine machinery of retribution has been set in motion. Narcissus, still blissfully unaware of the storm gathering over his beautiful head, continues his solitary pursuits, his heart as cold and untouched as ever. But Nemesis has heard the cries of the spurned, The curse has been acknowledged, and a quiet, pristine, and perfectly reflecting pool of water, hidden deep in a secluded glade, is now waiting patiently for him, ready to become the mirror of his fate, the beautiful, silent instrument of his exquisitely tailored doom. The echoes of those he rejected are about to find their ultimate ironic answer in his own reflection. Narcissus, entirely oblivious to the divine retribution that Nemesis has so carefully orchestrated in response to the pleas of his many spurned admirers, continues his accustomed life of solitary hunting and proud indifference. He roams the verdant forests and cool mountainsides, a figure of almost painful beauty, yet his heart remains a fortress, unbreached by any whisper of affection from the outside world. But the fates, those silent weavers of destiny, are now gently, inexorably, guiding his footsteps towards a specific, secluded spot, a place where his life will take a dramatic and irreversible turn. You are about to witness the moment when Narcissus, parched from the hunt and weary from his wanderings, stumbles upon a hidden, pristine pool of water, a natural mirror that will become the beautiful, fatal trap for his all-consuming vanity. Imagine the scene, painted with such vivid, poignant detail by Ovid in his Metamorphoses. It is a hot, languid day, perhaps the height of summer. The sun beats down, and Narcissus, having been out hunting or simply roaming in his customary solitude, feels a deep thirst and a weariness from the heat. He seeks a cool, shady place to rest and drink. And so, he wanders off the beaten path, deeper into a quiet, untouched part of the forest, a place where, as Ovid describes it, no shepherd ever came, nor did browse goats, nor any other cattle ever disturb it. No bird, no wild beast, nor falling branch had ever ruffled its surface. It is a spring of perfect, silvery clarity, its waters untroubled, its surface as smooth and still as polished glass, surrounded by lush green grass and shaded by trees that keep the sun's fiercest rays at bay. It is a place of almost preternatural peace and purity, an untouched sanctuary. It's the kind of spot that seems almost too perfect, too idyllic. A place where magic, or perhaps misfortune, might easily linger. Nemesis, you sense it, has chosen her stage with exquisite care. Ah, Narcissus might think, wiping a bead of sweat from his perfect brow. This looks like just the spot for a weary hunter to refresh himself. So peaceful, so reflective, almost as if it were waiting for someone of discerning taste to appreciate its unspoiled charm. Little does he know. He kneels down by the grassy margin of the pool, intending simply to quench his thirst. He leans forward, his beautiful face approaching the still surface of the water. And then it happens. As he gazes into the pellucid depths, he sees, for the very first time in his life with such clarity, an image of such breathtaking, unparalleled beauty that it stops his heart. He sees a pair of eyes like stars, framed by locks of hair worthy of Apollo himself, lips like chiseled coral, a neck of ivory, a countenance of such perfect, youthful grace that he is instantly, utterly, and irrevocably captivated. He is, of course, looking at his own reflection, but in his innocent vanity, in his complete lack of true self-awareness despite Tiresias's prophecy. He does not recognize it as such. He believes he has discovered another being, a wondrous water spirit, perhaps, or some incredibly beautiful youth who dwells within this enchanted spring. A key mythological detail is this initial, profound misapprehension. He falls desperately in love, not with himself knowingly, but with what he perceives to be another, equally perfect, being. It's love at first sight, but the sight is of his own mirrored form. It's the ultimate cosmic prank, tailored perfectly to a specific flaw. The effect is instantaneous and all-consuming. All thought of thirst, of weariness, of the hunt, vanishes from his mind. He is transfixed, mesmerized by this vision of beauty. He tries to reach for it, to embrace the lovely form in the water, but his arms close on nothing but the cool, yielding liquid. He speaks to it, whispering words of adoration, of longing, of desperate entreaty. But the image only moves its silent lips in perfect, tantalizing mimicry. He is caught in a hopeless snare of his own making, or rather, of his own reflection. He has found, at last, someone he deems worthy of his love, someone whose beauty matches his own exacting standards, and that someone is an intangible phantom. It's like scrolling through your own social media feed, seeing that one perfectly angled, perfectly lit selfie you took last summer, and thinking, now, that's someone I could spend the rest of my life with, if only they weren't, you know, just a picture of me. He lies there by the pool, utterly oblivious to the world around him. He forgets to eat. He forgets to sleep, his entire being consumed by this silent, watery courtship. He cannot tear himself away from the beautiful face that gazes back at him with what he perceives as an equal, if equally silent, longing. The harder he tries to possess the image, the more it eludes him, dissolving in ripples only to reform, still perfect, still unattainable. When the water stills, a quirky and deeply tragic aspect of this enchantment is Narcissus's complete inability to understand what is happening. He, who had been so adept at dismissing the affections of others, is now entirely helpless in the grip of his own impossible passion. He weeps in frustration, and the image weeps with him. He smiles, and the image smiles back. He is locked in a perfect, closed loop of self-reflection, a love affair with an echo of his own form. Classicists and art historians have long been captivated by this scene. The image of Narcissus at the pool, lost in contemplation of his own beauty, has become an enduring symbol of vanity, self-obsession, and the deceptive nature of appearances. There are countless depictions in art, from ancient frescoes and mosaics to Renaissance masterpieces by artists like Caravaggio, each capturing a different nuance of its tragic enchantment. Historians still argue about the specific location that might have inspired the myth. Were there actual springs or pools in ancient Greece known for their particularly clear, reflective qualities that might have given rise to such a tale? For now, Narcissus is trapped. The pristine pool, which seemed at first to offer such cool refreshment, has become his prison. Nemesis's plan is unfolding with cruel precision. The beautiful hunter, who once roamed free and heartless, is now tethered by an invisible cord of desire to a phantom he can never touch, a love he can never truly know. The fatal trap, baited with his own perfect beauty, has been sprung. Narcissus remains utterly captivated, a prisoner of his own reflection in that still, clear forest pool. Days melt into an undifferentiated blur of hopeless longing, his entire existence now revolving around the beautiful, silent image that stares back at him from the water. You are witnessing the relentless, agonizing progression of his self-inflicted torment, an illusory love affair that offers no solace, no genuine connection, only an ever-deepening obsession and a slow, sorrowful wasting away. He is chasing a watery phantom, a love that is as insubstantial as the ripples on the pool's surface, yet as powerful and all-consuming as any earthly passion. He continues to speak to the reflection. His voice, once perhaps imperious and dismissive when addressing his many admirers, now filled with a desperate, pleading tenderness, he pours out all the words of adoration he had never bestowed upon another living soul. He praises the beauty of those star-like eyes, those locks worthy of Apollo, those lips that seem to offer a silent promise of kisses that can never be fulfilled. He wonders aloud why this beautiful beloved is so elusive, so tantalizingly close yet so eternally out of reach. He asks why it flees his touch, why it offers no response beyond a perfect, silent mimicry of his own expressions. A key mythological element here, as Ovid so poignantly describes, is Narcissus's growing confusion and despair as he fails to grasp the true nature of his watery paramour. He cannot understand why such beauty would be so cruel, so unresponsive to his heartfelt pleas. It's like he's sending an endless stream of deeply emotional text messages to a number that doesn't actually exist, and then being heartbroken by the silence. Why fairest of all beings? He might lament to the unblinking image. Do you torment me so I offer you my heart, my soul, my very life, and yet you give me back only, well, you give me back me, which is lovely, of course, but not entirely helpful in this particular romantic endeavor. He tries every tactic he can imagine to coax a response from the silent beloved. He smiles, and the image smiles back. He weeps, and the image weeps in perfect sympathy. He stretches out his arms in a gesture of embrace, and the image stretches out its own arms, seemingly inviting him closer, yet always remaining just beyond his grasp, separated by that cool, unyielding surface of the water. This perfect reflection of his own emotions, his own desires, only serves to deepen his obsession, creating a feedback loop of longing and frustration. He is, in essence, having a very intense, very one-sided relationship with himself, and it is, unsurprisingly, not going well. His physical decline continues. He forgets to eat. He forgoes sleep, his body sustained only by the sight of his beloved image and the increasingly faint hope of some eventual union. His once vibrant beauty begins to fade, his cheeks grow hollow, his eyes, though still fixed on the pool, become shadowed with weariness and despair. The irony is almost unbearable. The very beauty that has so captivated him is now being consumed by his hopeless devotion to it. He is a flower wilting from an unquenchable thirst. Even as he lies beside a pool of seemingly life-giving water, a quirky and deeply tragic aspect of his delusion is his inability to recognize the simple truth of the situation, even when clues are presented. Ovid describes how, when he weeps, his tears disturb the surface of the pool, causing the beloved image to momentarily shatter and disappear. This brings him fresh agony, as he believes his beloved has fled from him. When the water stills and the image reforms, his joy is immense. Yet he fails to make the connection that his own actions are directly influencing the appearance and disappearance of the one he adores. He is so lost in his self-absorption that he cannot see the most obvious of explanations. It is during this period of intense, hopeless pining that Narcissus, according to Ovid, finally begins to understand the terrible truth. As he gazes at the perfect synchronicity of the image's movements with his own, as he realizes that its expressions of sorrow and joy are merely reflections of his own heart, the devastating awareness dawns upon him, est ego sum. That one is I. He has fallen in love with himself. This realization, far from freeing him, plunges him into an even deeper abyss of despair. He now understands the utter impossibility of his passion. He desires what he is, yet can never truly have as an external beloved. He is both the lover and the loved, the pursuer and the pursued, trapped in an eternal, unbreakable, and ultimately fatal, narcissistic embrace. The prophecy of Tiresias that he would live a long life if he never came to know himself has come to its tragic fulfillment. He now knows himself, or at least his own image, and that knowledge is his death warrant. Classicists and psychologists continue to analyze this moment of recognition. Is it a true moment of self-awareness, however tragic? Or is it merely a recognition of the mechanics of reflection, without any deeper understanding of his own character flaws or the pain he has caused others? Historians still argue whether the Narcissus myth, in its earlier forms, might have been a simpler nature myth, perhaps about a spirit dwelling in a spring, that only later acquired these profound psychological and moral dimensions, particularly through the sophisticated literary retelling by Ovid. But for Narcissus, lying by the pool, the dawning of this terrible truth offers no escape, only a confirmation of his doom. He is consumed by a love that can have no resolution, a fire that feeds upon itself. He continues to gaze at his reflection, now with the added torment of understanding, his life force slowly ebbing away, his once proud form wasting into a shadow of its former beauty. The illusion of love has become his only reality, and it is an illusion that is leading him, step by agonizing step, towards his inevitable end. Narcissus remains a captive by the side of that still, fateful pool, his life force slowly ebbing away, consumed by the impossible love for his own watery reflection. He has now recognized the terrible truth that the beautiful beloved who has so utterly enchanted him is none other than himself, and this knowledge has only deepened his despair, for he understands the utter hopelessness of his passion. As he continues his sorrowful vigil, pouring out his laments to the beautiful, silent image that is both his tormentor and his only solace. Another voice, faint and disembodied, begins to mingle with his own cries of anguish. It is the voice of Echo, the nymph whose heart he so cruelly broke, now reduced to a mere sound, a sorrowful reply that can only give back to Narcissus the fading fragments of his own despairing words. Imagine the scene in that secluded, sun-dappled glade, now heavy with an almost unbearable melancholy. Narcissus, pale and weakened, lies by the water's edge, his eyes still fixed on his reflection. He speaks to it, his voice perhaps now just a hoarse whisper, filled with all the pain of his self-consuming love. "O youth loved in vain," he might cry, addressing the beautiful, unresponsive image. And from the surrounding rocks, from the depths of the silent forest, a soft, mournful voice, almost like a sigh of the wind itself, would answer him. In vain. It is Echo, her presence unseen, her tragedy forever intertwined with his. She, who had once longed to speak her own words of love to him, is now condemned to be the sympathetic, yet ultimately helpless chorus to his self-inflicted sorrow. It's a heartbreakingly ironic duet, a shared lament between the one who could not love anyone but himself and the one who loved him too much and was left with only the echo of his rejection. If only my suffering could end, Narcissus might groan. But this beauty holds me fast, and Echo's voice, filled with its own ancient pain, would sadly repeat, holds me fast. This interaction, or rather this one-sided conversation with its sorrowful, repetitive accompaniment, is a key feature in Ovid's telling of the myth, adding another layer of profound pathos to Narcissus's final days. Echo, even in her disembodied state, cannot entirely abandon the one she loved, however cruelly he treated her. Her presence as a mere voice underscores the themes of reflection, repetition, and the inescapable consequences of past actions that run through the entire myth. She is a constant, auditory reminder of the love he spurned, and perhaps a subtle, mournful, "I told you so" from the universe itself. Though she herself is incapable of forming such an original sentiment, a quirky, though deeply poignant aspect of this is to consider Echo's own experience. Is there a kind of bittersweet, sorrowful satisfaction for her in this? She can finally speak to Narcissus, in a way, even if it is only with his own words. She can share his grief, even if he is unaware of her true presence or the depth of her own earlier suffering. Or is it simply an eternal torment for her, to be forever bound to repeat the laments of the one who caused her such pain? A constant reliving of her own heartbreak through his? The myth doesn't offer easy answers, leaving her emotional state to our empathetic imagination. She is both a victim and a sorrowful, almost pitying observer of his self-destruction. Narcissus himself, in his profound self-absorption, likely gives little thought to the source of these echoing replies. He might perceive them as the very landscape mourning with him, or perhaps as a trick of his own fevered mind, or even, in his delusion, as some form of faint, tantalizing response from his watery beloved. He is so consumed by his own image, his own passion, that he is unlikely to recognize the voice as that of the nymph he once so cruelly dismissed. He is trapped in his own reflective echo chamber, both literally and metaphorically. Classicists often discuss the literary artistry of this section of Ovid's narrative, how he masterfully weaves together the two separate tragedies, making Echo's fate a direct commentary on and a poignant counterpoint to Narcissus's. Her inability to speak for herself mirrors his inability to see beyond himself. Her love was outward directed and unrequited. His is inward directed and equally, though differently, unfulfillable. Together, they form a perfect tragic symmetry. Historians still argue about the precise origins and evolution of both the Echo and the Narcissus myths, and whether their linkage was an original feature or a later poetic masterstroke by Ovid or other storytellers. Did the concept of an echo nymph exist independently as a way to explain the natural phenomenon, only later to be woven into the more psychologically complex tale of the self-loving youth? But as Narcissus lies dying by the pool, his life force ebbing away with each unanswered plea to his own reflection. The voice of Echo is his constant, sorrowful companion. She cannot save him. She cannot even offer him her own words of comfort or reproach. She can only bear witness to his self-destruction, her own tragic fate forcing her to be the final, mournful soundtrack to his demise. Her lament, born of his words, becomes a shared expression of a love that, in its different ways, was doomed from the start for both of them. The glade is filled with a symphony of sorrow, a beautiful youth fading by a silent pool, and a disembodied voice that can only repeat his despair over and over again until the very end. You are now a constant, if unseen, companion to Narcissus in that lonely, enchanted glade. The vibrant, aloof hunter has become a pale, weakened figure, utterly consumed by his impossible passion for his own reflection. Days blur into weeks, the sun arcing overhead, the moon casting its silvery light on the still pool. But Narcissus remains, a statue of sorrow, his life force slowly but inexorably draining away. You are witnessing a profound wasting, a physical and mental deterioration fueled by an unfulfillable love, a beauty that has turned inward and become a devouring flame. He is quite literally being eaten alive by himself, a tragic feast of one. His once perfect physical form, the very source of his fatal enchantment, begins to show the cruel marks of his self-imposed starvation and unceasing grief. A key mythological detail, often emphasized by poets like Ovid, is this slow, agonizing decline. His skin, once as smooth and radiant as polished ivory, becomes pallid and drawn. His eyes, which had sparkled like distant stars, grow hollow and shadowed, though they never leave the beloved image in the water. His limbs, once strong and graceful from the hunt, become thin and listless. The vibrant energy that had made him seem almost a young god is now replaced by a profound, weary languor. He is a flower deprived of sunlight and sustenance, slowly wilting by the very pool that holds his gaze captive. It's like watching a magnificent ice sculpture slowly melt in the sun, its perfect features dissolving into a formless puddle of sorrow. Oh, what a pity! A passing woodland creature might think, if woodland creatures mused on such things. He was so terribly handsome. Now he just looks terribly hungry, and a bit damp. His mental state mirrors his physical decay. The initial bewilderment and passionate pleading have given way to a deeper, more resigned despair, punctuated by moments of acute, agonizing realization. He now understands, with a terrible clarity, that the beautiful face in the water is his own. He knows that he is pining for an illusion, a love that can never be returned, never be possessed. Yet this knowledge brings him no release. He cannot break the spell. He is like a man dying of thirst who sees a mirage of a cool oasis, but knows it is not real, yet cannot stop himself from crawling towards it. His love for his reflection has become a fatal addiction, a beautiful, inescapable trap. He continues to speak to his watery image, his voice now weaker, often broken by sobs. He might lament his cruel fate, to be so beautiful yet so alone, to be loved by many yet unable to love any but this silent, untouchable phantom of himself. He might even, in moments of bitter self-awareness, reproach his own beauty for having brought him to this tragic pass. Was it for this, he might whisper to the reflection, that I was born so fair to desire only myself, and in that desire to perish, ere to perish. The forest around him offers no comfort. The nymphs, including the unseen, disembodied Echo, may still linger, their sorrow a silent or repetitive counterpoint to his own, but they cannot reach him, cannot break through the wall of his self-absorption. He is lost in his own private hell, a hell made all the more agonizing by the exquisite beauty of its object. A quirky and rather profound psychological aspect of this is how Narcissus's obsession prevents him from engaging with the real world, from seeking real sustenance, real connection. He has everything he needs for life around him. The cool water of the spring, though he only sips from it, if at all, for fear of disturbing the image. The fruits and berries of the forest, the potential companionship of other beings. But he chooses, or is compelled by his fatal flaw, to ignore it all. His entire being focused on the one thing he can never truly have. It's a powerful metaphor for any all-consuming, ultimately sterile obsession. Classicists and literary critics often explore the theme of seeing versus knowing in Narcissus's decline. He sees his reflection, but for a long time, he does not know it is himself. When he finally knows, this self-knowledge does not lead to wisdom or liberation, as it ideally should in Greek, thought remember the Delphic maxim, know thyself, but to an even deeper despair and an acceptance of his own destruction. His self-knowledge is a confirmation of his isolation, not a path out of it. Historians still argue whether this tragic interpretation of self-knowledge was Ovid's particular spin, or if it reflects a deeper, more pessimistic strand within earlier versions of the myth concerning the dangers of introspection when untempered by external connection. So, as you watch Narcissus slowly wasting away by the pool, his body growing frail, his spirit consumed by his impossible love, you are witnessing the final stages of Nemesis's perfectly tailored retribution. The youth who scorned all others, who lived only for the admiration of his own beauty, is now dying for love of that very beauty, a love that offers no comfort, no future, only a slow, sorrowful fade into oblivion. The vibrant hunter is becoming a pale shadow, his life force dimming like a candle in the wind, his final farewell to his own beloved image drawing ever nearer. The sun filters through the leaves of the ancient forest, casting dappled light upon the still, clear pool where Narcissus lies, a mere shadow of his former radiant self. His life force is almost entirely extinguished, consumed by that impossible, all-devouring love for his own watery reflection. You are present now for his final, poignant moments, a scene of heartbreaking beauty and profound tragedy, as he whispers his last farewells, not to a living, breathing beloved, but to the silent, beautiful phantom that has been both his only solace and his ultimate undoing. Death, which he had so carelessly wished upon himself in his cruel rejection of Echo, may I die before you enjoy my body, is now about to claim him, a victim of a love mirrored and a prophecy fulfilled. As his strength fails, Narcissus's gaze remains locked on the image in the water. His voice, when he can summon the energy to speak, is a mere whisper, a faint breath against the silence of the glade. He knows the end is near. There is no more struggle, no more desperate pleading for the image to come to life or step forth from the pool. There is only a deep, sorrowful acceptance of his fate, a weary resignation to this love that has consumed him. He might reach out a trembling hand, his fingers barely ruffling the surface of the water, as if trying one last time to touch the beloved face that is both his own and eternally separate. It's a gesture of infinite longing and infinite despair. Oh, beautiful boy, he might sigh, his words almost lost in the rustle of the leaves. Loved in vain, cherished in vain. We must part now. Even death cannot separate us entirely. For as I fade, so too will you, my constant, silent companion. And as he speaks these last sorrowful words, the unseen nymph Echo, her disembodied voice still haunting the glade, faithfully repeats his fading phrases. This is a key mythological detail that Ovid emphasizes, creating a final, poignant duet of shared sorrow. When Narcissus whispers, "Alas, who in Latin," Echo's voice sighs back from the surrounding rocks and trees. Alas, who, when he breathes his final, heartbreaking farewell to the image. Farewell, dear boy, loved in vain. Veil, puer inutiliter, delect. Veil. Echo's sorrowful voice gives back his last words. Farewell. Veil. It is a moment of almost unbearable pathos. His dying words are not heard by a living lover who can offer comfort or share his grief in a tangible way, but only by his own reflection, and by the disembodied voice of the nymph whose heart he broke. A voice now condemned to be the eternal repeater of his sorrow. It is a love story that ends not with a kiss, but with an echo. His head then sinks upon the green grass by the poolside. His eyes, even as the light fades from them, still trying to hold on to that beloved image in the water. And with a final, gentle sigh, Narcissus breathes his last. The beautiful, proud, and tragically self-absorbed youth is no more. He has died quite literally of a broken heart, a heart broken by its own impossible reflection. The silence that descends upon the glade is profound, broken only by the soft weeping of the nymphs who had secretly admired him, and perhaps by the faintest, most sorrowful whisper of Echo's lingering voice. He didn't need a fancy funeral director from the big city. Nature itself, and a very heartbroken nymph, provided the final, somber soundtrack. The ancient poets tell us that even as his shade was ferried by Charon across the river Styx into the underworld, Narcissus leaned over the side of the boat, still trying to catch a glimpse of his own reflection in those murky, infernal waters. His obsession, it seems, was truly eternal, a defining characteristic that followed him even into the realm of the dead. It's a rather bleak image, suggesting that even in death, he found no release from his self-absorption. Still looking good, even as a slightly translucent, very gloomy ghost. He might have thought, admiring his spectral cheekbones in the Stygian gloom, a quirky, though perhaps fitting, aspect of his death is its utter solitude. Despite the unseen presence of Echo, he dies alone, with no comforting hand to hold, no loving voice to soothe his passing, save for the echo of his own words. It is the ultimate fate for one who could love no one but himself. Classicists and literary scholars have long analyzed the final moments of Narcissus as described in various ancient texts. The precise wording of his farewell, the role of Echo's repetitions, and the imagery of his continued self-gazing even in the underworld all contribute to the myth's complex psychological and philosophical resonances. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on his unrepentant self-love, even in death, was an original part of the myth, or a later moralizing addition designed to underscore the dangers of vanity. But in this quiet glade, by this still, clear pool, the immediate tragedy is complete. The most beautiful youth in the world has perished, a victim of his own reflection, a testament to Nemesis's perfectly tailored retribution. The prophecy of Tiresias has been fulfilled. He lived a long life only until he knew himself. And that self-knowledge, that recognition of his own image as the object of his impossible love, led directly to his demise. Yet, even as sorrow hangs heavy in the air, the myth has one final, gentle transformation in store, a way to ensure that the memory of Narcissus's beauty, if not his flawed heart, will linger in the world of the living. Narcissus, the youth of unparalleled, yet ultimately fatal beauty, lies dead by the edge of the reflecting pool, his life extinguished by his impossible love for his own image. The forest glade is hushed, save perhaps for the faint, sorrowful whispers of Echo and the gentle rustling of leaves. you are a witness to the aftermath of this poignant tragedy, a sense of profound loss mingling with the quiet justice of Nemesis's decree. But in the world of Greek mythology, death is often not the absolute end, especially for figures whose lives and beauties have touched the divine or the extraordinary. As the woodland nymphs, the dryads and naiads who had secretly admired Narcissus from afar, and perhaps even some of those he had cruelly spurned, their anger now softened by pity, gathered to mourn his passing and prepare his funeral rites. A delicate, beautiful miracle is about to unfold. His body is gone, but in its place, a new and lovely form of life will spring forth, a floral tribute to his tragic beauty. The nymphs, their hearts filled with sorrow for the beautiful youth, however cold and proud he had been in life, prepare a funeral pyre for him. They search for his body along the grassy bank of the pool where he had lain pining for so many days and nights. But, as Ovid tells us, they find no corpse. In the very spot where Narcissus had breathed his last, his eyes fixed on his watery reflection, a new and exquisite flower has appeared, a bloom previously unknown in those woodlands. It is a flower with a central golden yellow cup, or corona, surrounded by delicate pale white or sometimes yellow petals. Its head is slightly bowed, as if in perpetual contemplation or gentle sorrow, and it often grows near water, its image reflected on the surface, just as Narcissus had gazed at his own. This, the myth proclaims, is the Narcissus flower, sprung from the earth as a final, poignant metamorphosis of the beautiful, ill-fated youth. It's like nature itself decided that such beauty, however flawed its human vessel, deserved to live on in some form, a perennial reminder of his story. Well, one nymph might have whispered to another, brushing away a tear. He always was a bit of a delicate flower, wasn't he? Just literally now? This transformation into a flower is a deeply symbolic and recurring motif in Greek mythology. A key mythological detail is that such metamorphoses often occur for individuals whose lives are marked by intense passion, tragic loss, or a close connection to the divine or natural world. Hyacinthus, beloved by Apollo, became the hyacinth flower after his accidental death. Adonis, the beautiful lover of Aphrodite, was transformed into the anemone. Clytie, who pined for the sun god Helios, became the sunflower or heliotrope, forever turning her face towards him. These floral transformations serve as a way to immortalize the individual, to embed their story and their essence into the living fabric of the natural world. Each spring, when the narcissus flower blooms, its delicate beauty and often mournful, nodding posture silently retell the tale of the youth who loved only himself. The specific characteristics of the narcissus flower members of the Narcissus genus, which includes daffodils, jonquils, and paperwhites, lend themselves beautifully to the symbolism of the myth. Their often strong, sweet, and sometimes slightly heady fragrance can be seen as an echo of Narcissus's captivating allure. Their tendency to grow in moist, reflective places, and the way their flower heads often bend downwards, directly mirrors his fatal obsession with his own image in the pool. Even the name Narcissus itself is etymologically linked to the Greek word narc, meaning numbness or torpor, from which we also derive the word narcotic. This has led some scholars to speculate that the flower might have been associated with a state of stupefaction, or even with the underworld and death, long before it became specifically linked to the youth Narcissus. A quirky tidbit is that the ancient Greeks sometimes planted narcissus flowers on graves, perhaps symbolizing a sleep from which one does not awaken, or as an offering to the deities of the underworld. So, the flower carried a certain somber, chthonic resonance even apart from our specific myth. The transformation into a flower offers a kind of gentle, bittersweet resolution to Narcissus's tragic tale. While his human form, with its capacity for cruelty and its fatal self-absorption, has perished, his extraordinary beauty is preserved and even multiplied in the delicate blooms that now grace the landscape. It is a beauty that can now be appreciated by all, without the pain of his rejection or the burden of his pride. The flower, unlike the youth, does not scorn admiration. It simply offers its quiet loveliness to the world. It's a form of immortality, a way for his story to be remembered and his beauty to endure, albeit in a changed and perhaps more innocent form. At least now. Echo's fading voice might wistfully sigh. His beauty can bring a little joy to the world, without breaking any more hearts. Except perhaps for those who suffer from particularly bad hay fever when these things are in bloom. Classicists and botanists continue to explore the intricate connections between the myth, the flower, and ancient Greek cultural practices. Was the myth created to explain the origin and characteristics of a pre-existing, significantly named flower? Or did a story about a vain youth gradually become associated with a particularly fitting bloom? Historians still argue whether the symbolic associations of the flower preceded the myth of the youth, or if the myth gave the flower its deepest cultural meanings. But as you stand in that quiet glade, the funeral pyre unneeded, the body vanished, and in its place this new, delicate blossom nodding by the water's edge, you feel a sense of poignant completion. Narcissus's human tragedy has ended, but his beauty, in a gentler, more natural form, will return with every spring, a perennial whisper of his name, a silent reflection on a love that was ultimately and fatally for himself alone. The somber song of his life has found its final, floral note. Narcissus has found his poignant, floral immortality by the edge of the reflecting pool, his beauty transformed into the delicate bloom that bears his name. The immediate, intense drama of his self-consuming love and tragic demise has reached its conclusion. But what of Echo, the other half of this sorrowful dyad? Her fate, as we have seen, was a different kind of fading. A slow, heartbreaking dissolution of her physical form, leaving only her voice to linger, a disembodied presence in the lonely, desolate places of the earth. As Narcissus is remembered in the silent beauty of a flower, Echo's legacy becomes purely auditory, a haunting, ethereal whisper that forever roams the wild, a perpetual reminder of unrequited love and a voice tragically stolen. After her devastating rejection by Narcissus and her subsequent physical wasting away, all that remained of Echo, according to Ovid's famous telling, were her voice and her bones, the latter eventually turning to stone. But her voice, that once vibrant, loquacious instrument, now cursed by Hera to mere repetition, could not be entirely extinguished. It became a free-floating entity, untethered from any physical form, a phenomenon of sound that inhabits caves, mountain valleys, deep forests, and any place where sounds can rebound and be reflected with a certain mournful clarity. She is, quite literally, the echo we hear in such places, a constant, sorrowful mimicry, forever unable to speak her own thoughts, forever bound to repeat the last fragments of words spoken by others. You call out your name into a vast, empty canyon, and it is her essence, her lingering, sorrowful presence, that sends your own words back to you, a perpetual reminder of her tragic inability to communicate her own heart. It's a profoundly lonely, almost ghostly existence, forever on the periphery of life's conversations, never an initiator, always just a reply. Is there anyone out there who understands my pain? A lost traveler might cry, an echo's voice tinged with an eternity of similar, unvoiced sorrow might sadly whisper back, my pain. This transformation into the natural phenomenon of an echo is a powerful and deeply fitting culmination of the nymph's tragic story. A key mythological detail is this complete dematerialization, except for her voice. The nymph whose defining characteristic was her love of speech, and whose greatest tragedy was the loss of its independent use, now becomes the very embodiment of reflected sound. Her fate is to be forever a responder, never an instigator, a poignant mirroring of her frustrating one-sided attempts to connect with Narcissus, and perhaps a broader commentary on the nature of communication and the pain of being unheard. Imagine her existence now. She drifts unseen through the world, a presence felt only when sound disturbs the silence. She would hear the joyful laughter of children playing in a meadow, and her voice would sadly repeat their merriment, a joy she can no longer truly share. She would hear the passionate declarations of lovers in a secluded grove, and her voice would amplify their words of affection, a love she herself was so cruelly denied. She would hear the mournful cries of shepherds searching for lost lambs, the triumphant calls of hunters, the solemn chants of priests in distant temples, the roar of waterfalls, the sigh of the wind through ancient pines, and she could only give back a fragment of these sounds, never adding her own original melody, her own unique story to the symphony of the world. Her existence is one of perpetual second-hand sound, a constant, sorrowful reminder of the authentic, vibrant voice she once possessed and so tragically lost. It's like being doomed to be the universe's auto-reply system, forever saying re your last statement, but with a deep underlying sadness, a quirky and rather melancholic aspect of her fate is that she continues to witness the world, particularly the world of human and natural sound, but can only reflect it, never truly participate in it or comment upon it in her own right. She heard Narcissus's final laments by the pool and repeated his sorrowful farewells, her own ancient heartbreak mingling with his. Now, she continues to hear the myriad sounds of life, her voice becoming an unwitting amplifier of joy, sorrow, fear, and wonder, but always, always as a repetition, never as an origin. Does she retain her own consciousness, her own memories of her former life, her love for Narcissus, her unending grief? The myths are often beautifully, tantalizingly vague on this, leaving it to our empathetic imagination. But the sense of a sentient, sorrowful presence lingering in those echoing places, a spirit of the air as some translations name her, is strong and deeply resonant. This etiological aspect of the myth, explaining the natural phenomenon of echoes, is a common feature in Greek storytelling, where the world around them was often populated with divine or semi-divine beings whose stories gave meaning and personality to natural forces and everyday occurrences. It's a way of weaving human emotion and narrative into the very fabric of the landscape. The often mournful, slightly unsettling quality we attribute to an echo, that sense of a sound fading, repeating, and then disappearing into silence, perfectly captures the essence of Echo's own tragic story of loss. Fading identity, and a voice that can never truly be her own again. Classicists and folklorists have explored the figure of Echo and her many variations across different cultures and literary traditions. The idea of a voice separated from a body, of a sound that is merely a reflection or a mimicry, appears in various forms, often associated with themes of illusion, memory, the boundaries between the real and the perceived, and the power of language or its absence. Historians still argue whether the specific character of Echo as a nymph cursed by Hera was an original part of a standalone nature myth, or if her story was always, or primarily, developed as a poignant counterpart to the tale of Narcissus. Their fates so perfectly, tragically intertwined. For Echo, her final form is a kind of immortality. Yes, but a profoundly limited and sorrowful one. She is not truly dead, in the sense that her voice, her essence, continues to exist. But she is not truly alive either, in the sense of having agency, of being able to shape her own destiny, or to express her own unique self. She exists as a perpetual reminder, a sound that is both hauntingly present and achingly absent, a voice that belongs to everyone who calls out in a lonely place, and yet in its origin belongs only to her, the nymph whose love and whose words were so cruelly and eternally unrequited. The wind on the mountainside, the whisper in the deep cave, the repeated sound in the silent valley, these are all, in a sense, the lingering, somber song of Echo's enduring, unfulfilled presence. The delicate narcissus flower now blooms by the still, reflecting pool, a silent, beautiful testament to a love tragically turned inward upon itself. The disembodied voice of Echo whispers through the lonely glades and across the misty mountaintops, a mournful, repetitive reminder of a love unrequited and a voice forever constrained to mimicry. The individual dramas of Narcissus, the youth consumed by his own image, and Echo, the nymph who faded into mere sound, have reached their poignant, transformative conclusions. But as you step back from the specifics of their sorrowful fates, you begin to see the larger, more enduring resonance of their intertwined story, a myth that has captivated the human imagination for millennia because it holds up a powerful, if sometimes unsettling, mirror to some of our most fundamental human experiences, the intoxicating allure of beauty, the sharp, lingering pain of unrequited love, the insidious dangers of vanity and unchecked self-absorption, and the profound, often overlooked, importance of empathy, genuine communication, and authentic connection with others. The myth's reflection casts a long, contemplative shadow, offering timeless lessons and cautionary whispers that still resonate deeply in our modern world. One of the most immediate and enduring themes, of course, is the critique of narcissism, a complex psychological concept that the myth itself gifted to our vocabulary. Narcissus's tragic end serves as a stark and unforgettable cautionary tale about the perils of excessive self-love, of becoming so enraptured by one's own perceived perfection, whether physical or otherwise, that all capacity for genuine reciprocal connection with the external world and with other beings is lost. His inability to love anyone but his own image leads not to fulfillment or triumph, but to profound isolation, agonizing despair, and ultimately a sterile, self-inflicted demise. A key historical and cultural fact is that the figure of Narcissus has served as a cornerstone in discussions of self-love, vanity, and personality disorders from ancient philosophical musings right through to the psychoanalytic theories of Sigmund Freud and beyond, into contemporary cultural critiques of our often image-obsessed, social media-driven society. The myth powerfully reminds us that while a healthy degree of self-regard is essential, a self-love that becomes a fortress, excluding all others and seeing the world only as a mirror for oneself, is a barren and ultimately life-denying path. It's like constantly curating the perfect online profile, but never actually engaging in a messy, imperfect, but real conversation with another human being. You might cultivate a beautiful image, but your soul remains unnourished. Echo's story, so inextricably linked with Narcissus's, offers an equally poignant exploration of unrequited love, the agony of being unheard, and the devastating consequences of having one's authentic voice silenced. Her curse, which robs her of the ability to initiate speech and forces her to merely repeat the words of others, is a powerful metaphor for the experience of those whose deepest feelings are not reciprocated, who cannot make their true selves understood, or who feel their identity is overshadowed, diminished, or even erased by the object of their affection or by the dominant voices around them. Her slow, sorrowful fading away, her transformation into a mere disembodied sound, speaks to the way in which unfulfilled longing, coupled with the inability to express one's genuine self, can lead to a profound diminishing of one's very being, a loss of substance and agency. Her plight underscores the vital importance of authentic communication, of being able to both speak our truth and to be truly heard by others. For the health of our individual spirits and the vitality of our connections, if only I could make you hear me. Echo's silent scream seems to resonate across the ages. Not just the echo of yourself, the myth also, with a subtle but insistent touch, explores the theme of empathy, or rather, its tragic absence in the character of Narcissus. He is entirely devoid of the ability to feel for others, to recognize or respond to the genuine affection and admiration offered to him by Echo and his countless other spurned suitors. His world is entirely self-referential, his heart a closed chamber, This profound lack of empathy is not presented merely as an unfortunate personality quirk. It is the very engine of his downfall. Had he been capable of seeing beyond his own beautiful reflection, of recognizing the pain he inflicted, of valuing the love that was so freely given, his fate and Echo's might have been entirely different. The myth seems to whisper that true self-knowledge, the kind that Tiresias's prophecy hinted at as being potentially fatal for Narcissus, is perhaps found not by gazing endlessly and exclusively at one's own image, but by seeing oneself reflected with honesty and compassion in the eyes and hearts of others through the give and take of genuine reciprocal human relationships. A quirky yet insightful aspect of the myth is its gentle but persistent critique of a purely aesthetic appreciation of beauty when it is divorced from inner qualities such as kindness, warmth, or emotional connection. Narcissus is captivated by physical perfection, primarily his own, but this beauty, devoid of a responsive heart, lacking in empathy, and incapable of forming genuine bonds, becomes a sterile, isolating, and ultimately destructive force. The narcissus flower, into which he is transformed, is undeniably beautiful. Yes, but as we've noted, it is also often associated with a certain coldness, a solitary self-regard, and in some traditions, even with sleep. Numbness recalled narc, or death. The myth appears to caution us that beauty without a corresponding beauty of spirit, without the capacity for connection, is a hollow and potentially dangerous allure. Classicists, psychoanalysts, poets, and artists through the ages have continued to find new layers of meaning and fresh relevance in the intertwined fates of Echo and Narcissus. Is it a commentary on the nature of art and imitation, with Echo representing the imitative arts and Narcissus the solipsistic, self-absorbed artist? Does it explore philosophical ideas about appearance versus reality, the illusion of the self, the nature of desire, or the profound human yearning for connection in a world that often seems indifferent? The myth's enduring power lies in its rich symbolism and its capacity to accommodate a multitude of interpretations, speaking to different human concerns across different eras. Historians still debate the precise folkloric or cultic origins of each figure, and whether their stories were always linked, or if their poignant pairing was a later literary masterstroke, perhaps by Ovid, designed to create a more profound and thematically resonant narrative. What remains undeniably clear is that this ancient tale, born from the fertile imagination and pastoral landscapes of ancient Greece, continues to speak to us with a quiet, insistent voice about some of the most fundamental and often painful aspects of the human condition. It reminds us to look beyond our own reflections, to listen for the genuine, sometimes faint, voices of others, to cultivate empathy as a vital human faculty, and to seek connections that are rooted in something deeper and more lasting than mere surface beauty or unexamined self-regard. The somber song of Echo and Narcissus, with its unrequited echoes and its fatally beautiful reflections, still whispers its cautionary, yet ultimately compassionate wisdom into our own often noisy and image-conscious modern world, urging us to find a love that truly sees and hears the other, a voice that is authentically our own, and a beauty that radiates from within. And so, the final sorrowful whispers of Echo and the last shimmering reflection of Narcissus gently fade into the quiet stillness of your night. We have wandered through sun-dappled ancient groves, witnessed a voice tragically stolen and a beauty fatally self-consumed, and felt the profound ache of love unrequited and misunderstood. Their timeless story, woven from the threads of Greek myth, reminds us of the delicate dance between self and other, the power of words both spoken and unspoken, and the enduring human search for connection in a world that can sometimes feel vast and lonely. As these ancient figures and their poignant fates recede from your thoughts, may you find a sense of gentle peace. The sorrows of myth have played their part, offering their quiet wisdom. Let your own mind now be calm, your breathing soft and even, and may your dreams be filled with the simple, comforting beauty of genuine voices and clear, kind reflections, leading you into a deep and restorative slumber. End of script. Sweet dreams.